All right, good morning, everybody. For our first session, I'm just going to do a quick overview of TrendSpider, how I set up my workspace, and then maybe we'll get into a little bit of charting. So we're working right now with Peloton, and right now we're on the weekly chart, but I have no indicators set up. I basically wiped my surface just to give you an idea of how quickly you can set this up. So let's just add a couple of things. So first off, we come up to the indicators here, hit these little three dots, manage indicators. Let's add some exponential moving averages. So EXP, go to exponential. We're going to have two. We're going to set up the 8 and the 21. So the 8, I'm going to keep that yellow. 21, I'm going to make that white. Set up a couple of simple moving averages. So SIM, we're going to make a 50, which I like to make blue. And let's make a 200, which I like as red. Okay, so now you can see, let's apply that. And we have moving averages. So we're on the weekly. There's not enough data for our 50 and 200, but when we go down to the smaller time frames, we'll be able to see that. I don't use the exponentials on the larger time frames, so for now we're just going to click these little W's for weekly. We'll click them all off. So right now we still have no indicators, but let's continue to build our indicator list. So we go back to indicators. Next we'll build a volume. So VOL, regular volume. We'll leave that by default. Next tool is our volume by price. Very cool tool, proprietary to TrendSpider. They developed this. We're going to use this a lot. This is one of my favorite tools. Volume by price, you can see. I'm going to leave that also by default. Let's apply that, take a quick look. So as you can see now, volume by price, this little slider here will give you an indicator of where the volume starts. So let's say we come down from this drop. We'll start from actually the first bullish candle here. And you can see from the week of March 16th, this move here, here's the volume that represents that move. So you can see our POC, or point of control. I usually turn this line off, but I'll leave it on for demonstration purposes. This indicates where the most volume in this move came. So as you see, we've come up, we consolidated with these 3 weeks here in this range. So most of our volume is holding here. But since Peloton is a relatively new IPO, I generally for IPOs will like to bring volume all the way back to the beginning, and that gives us an indication of where volume sits. So right here is our sweet zone. This is our supply zone, or our demand zone, I should say. So from $27 to $28. We can even highlight that here. Make that green. Demand zone. Going back to the indicators here, so you have you can collapse your indicators, clean up the look. You can expand them, and for volume by price, I'm going to click that, and I'm going to turn the point of control off. Point of control, basically the POC, just tells you where the most demand for that particular price is. So it's really just whatever jets out to the leftmost. That's where your demand is. Now, also for this volume by price, you can adjust it. I like to have it a little more tonal color. So sort of column color, we'll make it a little more tonal. Apply that, you can see there. And I generally don't need to see the volume amount, so we can turn that off real quick. And volume amount, where are you? Here, labels. I'll turn VWAP off also. And that gives us a good indication of volume here. Okay. I'm gonna refresh this real quick. So you can also grab here and adjust your screen. All right, so now next I will add the gap snake. So go back to indicators. This is a pretty neat tool. They just developed this and launched it a couple of weeks ago. Actually, probably about 4 to 6 weeks ago. Gap snake just basically identifies gaps for you. So you don't have to, sometimes those gap ups or gap downs are so small you can't even see them. This will actually tell you exactly where they are. So I'm going to apply that. We're not going to see anything right now on the weekly, but once we get onto a smaller time frames, we will be able to see that. And as far as other indicators, RSI is also a very popular indicator, relative strength index. That'll give you an idea of the strength of a stock. So you basically have your indicator here, and from 30 to 70 is your sweet zone. And we'll get into RSI a little more specifically later on, but we sometimes will come into overbought or oversold conditions, and we'll talk about that. So I think as far as indicators, there are other things we can go over, but this is really the basics. There's things like MACD, TTM squeeze, the Williams percent range. I mean, there's a whole slew of indicators you can use, but one thing you'll have to understand with indicators that generally they are lagging. They're basically telling you what price has done, not what price is going to do. So for this demonstration, I'm really just showing you the basic tools. So go back to volume. I try and keep, I'm a chartist, but I try and keep my charts as minimal as possible and really just showcase what's going on with price. So on the volume, I don't like the Christmas tree. It's starting to look a little festive. So I'm going to go back to volume. You see rising color, falling color. You can leave rising color, let's say green. I think that's pretty standard, but our falling color, I'm just going to make it another tonal color. And you can change out opacities. You can change the volume opacity. You can change the moving average, which is, you'll see, just a second, I'll apply that, is here. So this moving average, I believe, is a 14. No, it's a 20. So anytime you see spikes like this here, you are having above average volume. So that's really usually a good indication. We can dive deeper since, again, we're on the weekly. So anyway, let's get into charting a little bit. So here's your tools over here on your left-hand side. You have your trend line, your segments. This is a really cool tool that can measure moves percent by percent, your rectangle, your highlighting area, circles, type, arrows, so on and so forth. And we'll get into this a little later, but let's just look really quick at trend lines. So I'm going to use this little ray tool. It's a horizontal line. Let's mark off our lowest support zone. So you can see, like, you have here, like almost like a double bottom on these 2 weeks. So it's pretty good. I generally use purple as resistance, and I'll use green as support. So you can see, you double click, and you can change the thickness. You can make it really thick, make it really thin. I usually like thin to the next thinnest line. And you can also go back to your tool and then draw it again out. And you can move it left and right, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to move it right there. Double click it and make that purple. So here's our range. Again, Peloton's a newer stock. IPO'd here in September of 2019. But you can see already we're starting to develop a range. Here's another pretty neat tool. They just came out with the polygon tool. So we can just say, like, this has kind of been the trend right now. So, if we were to continue on this trend, then it's possible we could do this. Another cool thing about the polygon tool, you can make it smooth. Now you got a little harmonic pulse here. Anyway, so this is just giving you an idea of how you can draw out support and resistance lines. Now we have our trend lines. So here's something really cool that TrendSpider does. They do a lot of automated tools. So here you have AutoFib. So I know you guys have seen us use Fibonacci a lot. Fibonacci is something very interesting. It's basically all on mathematics. And you should gotta kind of look up Fibonacci and who he was and what he did. Basically, Fibonacci exists all throughout the universe, from spiral galaxies down to the way water will drain down a sink. It's interesting how Fibonacci kind of comes into a lot of the things that exist around us. But in the world of the stock market, we're constantly dealing against machines, and these machines are programmed. And interesting enough, Fibonacci levels get hit all the time. So anyway, do some research, look up Fibonacci. We're gonna do some deep dives into Fibonacci to show you a little bit about how it works and how we use it on different time frames. And also we can get really advanced with Fibonacci's, which kind of is pretty cool. We can geek out with it. But in any event, let's go back, and so you see this auto Fibonacci tool. It takes basically the previous swing high, where price went, and the swing low. So this is considered a move. Let's kind of take a step back and I'll show you. This is one swing. This is another swing. This is another swing. This is another swing. And this is our latest swing. So these are just kind of where price bottoms to where price tops off and then reverses. That's where you would draw your Fibonacci lines normally. But what's cool about TrendSpider is it basically can do it automatically for you. And we can show you other time frames, other stocks, and you're just clicking a button, auto fib, done. Another thing, auto trend line. So we click trends and we see, we don't have too much price discovery yet. So we're only seeing one trend line. But the reason why we're seeing one, let me just see where I have to do that. Okay, here. So when you click the little dots here next to trend, it's going to give you some features. We won't go too much into this down here, the island gaps and the drawing input, but mostly the analysis type. So right now we're on enhanced. Well, let's see what happens when we change it to original and apply it. So now we get nothing. So go back to trends. We'll go back to enhanced. So we get our one trend line. And let's try and change that to standard and apply. So we still get our one trend line. It's probably not a good example. I need to go with something with a little more price discovery. Let's see. All right, let's do this. Let's go down to the daily time frame. So here we're still on a weekly. Again, not too much price discovery. But once we go down to the daily, now we're talking. So I'm just scrolling back all the way here. So now we're seeing a little bit more of those swings and the price action that happened within it. So going back to trends, we can go enhanced. There we go. Crazy spaghetti mess. And let's try original. Better. Okay, so I personally use original when it comes to the auto trends. Some people go down to enhanced and you just get the spaghetti mess. However, it'll show you things that maybe you want to see in terms of the trend. So we'll go a little bit more of a deep dive later, but going back to the original, we'll apply it. And so what I'm going to do is shift click off of that one right there. And I like these too. I think this is kind of showing us somewhat of a broadening channel here. I can double click them and then it'll default to what my standard ray lines are. Pretty cool. So now again, go back to auto fib and boom, there we go. So let's turn the trends off turn the indicators off. Let's go to a 65-minute time frame, no markup, auto fib, auto trends, done, right? So you can see, all right, this was the downtrend line. We can get rid of this one. This actually is pretty cool. We can get rid of this one. This is pretty cool. Boom, there you go. Descending trend, descending triangle with a breakout here. You can actually turn on this intersecting line tool right here. Oh, look at that. We had a breakout. We had a breakdown. So, you know, this is just another way here. Look, another breakout. So this is just another way to kind of automatically do trend analysis. So if you want to do it manually, take off auto fib, take off trends. Let's take these lines off. And now we're looking at, okay. I had some previous markup here. Let me get rid of that. All right, so now we can see price came up here. I'm going to start my trend lines here. And it looks like it's probably there. I'm going to make that yellow. I like my, you'll see, I'm sure you've noticed I like yellow from that. Interesting, it actually looks like, yeah. So you use your rate, your horizontal tool. We see that price back on February 26th came up right here. So this is a resistance line right here. So you can see resistance came here. There was a little bit of resistance here, resistance here, resistance here. Actually, let me bring this down. It looks like this is probably more accurate. There we go. So you can see resistance here, here, here. And here we finally broke out. So we had a massive breakout here, all-time high, and then a massive rejection. Where? Back down to support. So when you have resistance and you have a breakout, it generally will turn into support and support and support. And now we have another breakout. So we know if we test, if price comes back down and we test this level again, we've tested it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Finally, we broke out. 1 support, 2 support, 3 support. I mean, we didn't come all the way down here, but pretty much look at these long wicks. Buyers came in and bought up the dips. Buyers came in and bought up the dips. Buyers came in and bought up the dips. Buyers came in, bought up the dips, bought up the dips. So when you see long wicks at the bottom, it's basically meaning that people are buying at those levels. Let's go back to our indicators. So now we're on a 65-minute chart here. I'll explain later why I use a 65-minute versus a 60-minute. It's actually very simple, and once you learn it, it's very logical. So let's turn our indicators back on, and now we see, look at this gap right here. Gap snake found it. Gap snake found it. Let's turn on our 21 and 8 EMAs. I've been working on a little bit of a signaling tool for this. Let's bring price. So this is your volume by price. I want to see from the breakout where volume has been. Look at this. Volume has been right here. I'm going to actually expand that. So you can see volume, no shocker here. We've got a little bit of a channel. See how price came up here, stopped and reversed. Price came back up here, stopped and reversed. Here, reversed. Here, reversed. Well, guess what? That's resistance. So let's put a resistance line there. Down here, this is support. Let's make that green. And look, we've got ourselves a little channel here. What can we do? We can come back and test it. Got rejected. Where could we come? Right back to support. Where can we go? Right back to resistance. Now you're starting to understand how, as traders and chartists, we can understand what is price doing. Now, if we break out, let's say we come here, we retest, we break out. Where is price going to go? Well, let's take a look. I'm going to hide that real quick. Go back to my ray tool. Well, let's see. Price came up to here. Well, you know what? look at right there, came down. We got ourselves another resistance level. This is where price can go again. Actually, I'll show you real quick. You hold down Command on a Mac, you drag it up, now you got yourself a new line. What happens if we break this line? Where can it go next? Well, let's take a look. Probably right here. Look at that, another resistance line. Now there's not much volume here. There's not much price discovery up here. So we know that once we hit this level, things can move pretty quickly. This is our demand zones here. This is where price wants to be. Once we break out, we don't know where it wants to be, but we're going to know potentially where it could be based on resistance and based on volume. But look, we're all low volume, low volume, low volume, low volume. Oh, we had a little bit of a spike here, above average volume. What happened to price? It went up. So this is just a basic way of how you can look at a chart, and you can use tools, and all of the different platforms, TradingView and whatnot, have these tools. They all do the same thing, sometimes in just slightly different ways. But anyway, so we have our volume by price telling us where volume sits. We have our horizontal trend lines, and we have our diagonal trend lines. And that's just basically, you could see this chart. It's kind of how my charts look.